Chapter 57. Blue. I can't believe Master's allowing a stray into his spell room, and by the look of it, Thana is equally disbelieving. There's a few low-burning lights in the room, some arcane flame that doesn't consume material and can't light other things on fire. Regardless, with the room lit, it's not the threatening, enclosed mage's space that it could be. I thank the stars for that. Thana and I are making a good pace down the stairs, but I doubt that I could support him if he decided to fight me. The back room has running water and a larger stone basin that will function as a tub. I'm pretty sure it's for brewing or disposing of components, but it should still be serviceable as a bathtub, right? Master would have told me if it was dangerous. I let Thana uncurl from me and lean against the wall as I go over to the faucets and start filling the tub. There's a few different sets of odd-looking bottles and soaps, rags stained with all different colors and smells. It doesn't take long to find a set of clean ones that will serve the purpose of a bath. The soaps provide an entirely different challenge. The wrappings have their names, but none of them are safe to use on skin. I'm going through the tags on the bottles, trying to find something to use, when I notice the strained whimpering from behind me. "I can't, Blue." Thana's whispering more to himself than to me. He's following the wall, backing away, tail between his legs. "I'm not getting in that tub." I have a feeling that the words were supposed to sound strong, but there's the barest hints of wavering in his voice. He looks a half-second away from running. I'm supposed to give you a bath." I try to remind him why we're here, but he's not looking at me. "I can't go in there, Blue." He repeats himself, voice quiet and trembling. "What's wrong?" I ask. I notice the slight trembling that's taken over his body, but I choose not to comment on that. He looks pale, but sweaty, more like he's seen a ghost and wants to throw up than anything else. Is there a smell in here that's bothering him? "Stars." Thana curses and closes his eyes, buckling against the wall and sliding down gracelessly until he's seated on the floor. "Thana!" I shout, running over to his side. The wound doesn't look too much worse. It doesn't even seem to be bleeding anymore. But he was hurt the last time he came in, too. I don't know much about healing, or even what dangerous things to look out for. Something inside me surges. I want to help. I just don't know what to do. I'm worried if I try to fix anything, it will hurt more than it helps. I slide my arm under his and pull him back into the main room. "I'm fine, I'm just dizzy," Thana hisses, shutting his eyes against the movement. "Sit down in the chair, just sit." I pull him up into the cushioned chair, my mind racing as I try to come up with a plan. Master's helped me with this before. When the world spun around me, he was there with kind words and gentle advice. Thana starts to protest, but I finally remember how Master dealt with the dizzy spells and lean him forward in the chair. "Just sit. Put your head between your knees. It's going to be fine. Just wait for it to pass." I mumble a collection of other, hopefully reassuring statements as Thana seems to take my advice and presses further into the position. His ears flatten against his skull, and I recognize the pain response for what it is. I rub his back as comfortingly as I know how, hoping I'm doing a good job. He has no complaints, at least. Water. That was another thing. That's supposed to be good for this, right? It's no trouble to produce a water bottle for him. Master keeps a bunch of bottles under the desk. With a little gentle instruction, he takes the bottle and drinks. "It's probably blood loss," I mumble. "You can get dizzy if you lose too much blood, right? That's a real thing." There's movement on the desk, and the sand elemental pulls my attention away from Thana for a second. Zadik is just shifting around confusedly on the desk before rolling out an apple that he seems to have hidden somewhere on the desk. Food. Food is good too, right? That's probably something good to give him. Though it does make my face flush a little bit that I'm floundering so much that the elemental sees fit to provide me with help. Most of the time it just hides from attention or plays with the pencils in its little cup. "Eat up!" I press the apple into Thana's free hand. Thana doesn't look relieved. He looks a little more sick, pulling his legs closer to his body and holding the shreds of his shirt together with his hands. "Are you sure I can... this is okay?" He whispers like someone might be listening to our conversation. It dawns on me that he thinks he'll get in trouble for taking something without my master's permission, and it takes me an equally long moment to realize that I hadn't been worried about the same issue. In all my time with him, through all my failures and our misunderstandings, he's never withheld anything that I needed, even when he and I had different definitions of need. He's fed Thana before, though I suppose that was with explicit permission and in his presence. I can see how this could be seen as stealing. I don't think I ever would have thought to chance this in another house. But here it's not even a question. Thana needs to eat something, and there's food right there. It's stupidly simple, and yet I can't help but feel warmed by the idea that I hadn't considered the possibility that this could be a bad thing. "My master would be very upset to find you cracked your head open again on the floor because you passed out." I try for a smile, but Thana doesn't seem to take the statement as a joke. He just nods seriously, alternating between taking bites of apple and sipping on the water. An uncomfortable silence settles on us, and try as I might, it's impossible to ignore. "So, what was that all about?" I try to make it sound like I'm just making conversation, but I know I've failed when Thana's whole body flinches. "Look, I don't have the fondest memories of grooming time, all right?" He shoves the last piece of apple into his mouth before admitting, "I don't like water." "That's understandable." I nod along. The bath had been more of an escape for me, especially in the big houses. My masters would never personally groom their pets, and only the favorites or exotics ever got special grooming privileges. I didn't have anyone assist or oversee my bathing, so it was a pretty nice time for me. I liked being alone, or at least in the presence of only other pets. It was good to get clean, especially down the road when masters grew less convinced that a simple bath would be enough to pretty me up. "Is there something I can do to make this easier?" I ask. I don't understand why it's hard, but I can understand that it is. The easier I can make this, the quicker I can get Thana back upstairs to proper medical care. I can't sit in a pool of water, all right? That sick bastard, he liked to hold me under. He said it was the only time I would ever really behave. Whenever I pissed him off, he gave me a bath, fucked with me until I begged, until I'd promise anything for him to let me out." I don't know what to say to that, but luckily he doesn't wait for me to respond. "Sorry, I shouldn't dump all of this on you. It's fucking stupid. I shouldn't be afraid of the bath." He apologizes, trying to backtrack, but this time I cut him off. "It's not stupid. I get it. How about I empty the tub and we just run the water? I'll give you a cloth and we just keep talking the whole time and you tell me if it's too much?" I bite my lip, hoping my suggestion sounds a little better to him than it does to me. "Yeah, so long as I don't have to sit in the water. Yeah, I think that'll be fine." Thana nods to himself, shooting me a weak smile. "Okay." I return the smile. There's a couple more power snacks stored around the room that I fetch. Thana looks at me curiously, but doesn't try to protest again. He takes his time munching on the bars as I drain the tub and find a bottle of cleaner that will actually work on skin without melting it. Thana handles the greater muck that has accumulated on his person while I dab delicately over his head wound. He claims it's still tender, but there's a fair amount of scrubbing that is required when clearing off dried blood. There's a dark set of bruises down his body, and while there's no actual pattern, there are a few that are quite new. As much as I try to be respectful, I can't keep my curiosity contained. "What happened?" I wish it didn't come out so harsh, but Thana doesn't seem to take offense. When Dot found me, we were on the other side of the city. We cut our way through the Cages market, but the night festivities had already started. He mumbles out his answer, pressing a little too roughly on some of the smaller scabs on his side. So how did you get slashed? I ask, parting his hair where the wound would have been if my master hadn't healed it. Some dumbass mistook me for one of the whores at the market. He laughs somewhat mirthlessly. It made a decent distraction, so Dot could get through, but they were a little more agitated when I tried to leave. I know about the whores at the market. Usually it's several pets that belong to one master who lets them out every night to turn a profit. I've wondered what that would be like, getting bought by a master that gives you such free rein, just the same nightly assignment. But it's not like I'm any good at seduction, or the more subtle arts that are necessary for picking a mark and actively seducing them for nightly gains. I'm good at doing what I'm told, but I've never really had to take a more active role than that. It's easier sometimes in that headspace where you're just reacting, where everything's just orders and responses. Apparently they were a guard or something. Don't know why they'd be carrying a knife otherwise. Bastards stripped my jacket off me and cut my bandages like they were opening a present. I got a lucky hit when I was running. He sneers, lathering the soap with extra ferocity. That gives me pause. Bandages on his chest? There's none left to see, but there's also no wound on his chest that the bandages would have been. Oh. It takes me a second to understand, but when it finally registers, I'm a little ticked off that Thana would be playing so loosely with his safety like this. You can't wear bandages around your chest as a bind. That's not safe. There's a hard edge to my voice that I'm not sure I was even expecting. I know it's not safe. I want to feel right, he whispers. There's nothing I can say to that, and we descend into awkward silence as Thana finishes washing up. There's not a lot of clothes down here, but I'd managed to find some loose-fitting articles that don't look like they've been used to clean up a chemical spill. Thana's appreciative nonetheless. So, how's your Kara? Thana asks quietly, and I barely contain a flinch. He used me for casting for the first time, I admit as I rinse off the tub and try to tidy everything back to its original state. Are you all right? His eyes go wide and he looks me up and down with new concern. I can feel myself shrinking under his gaze. I want to square my shoulders, stand a little taller, but my body won't cooperate. His concerned look doesn't weaken as he steps closer and makes his investigation of my features a little harder to ignore. I'm fine. A bit weak, but... I feel the moment that my thin smile snaps. I don't know. He says he's going to keep me, but I don't know if that's any better. I barely stayed conscious for the ritual. I feel the shaky, nauseous feeling spread in my body, and I have to fight the nervous giggles that rise in my throat. My offer still stands, Thana reminds me quickly. I can see the nervousness in his eyes, the genuine concern for my safety. I don't know how to tell him that I'm less concerned about my safety in this. I just nod and smile, but stay silent. Your master, he's kind to us, but... Thana bites his lip, trying to figure out how to word this. Is this really how he is? I just give him a confused look. I haven't seen a lot of... Thana rapidly continues, changing tracks. People want things in return. That's just a fact of life. Nobody does something for nothing, and he hasn't asked anything of me, so... It occurs to me that he thinks Kara makes me do things for him in exchange for the kindnesses he bestows on Thana and the other strays. The thought almost makes me smile, as though that rationale was the only way that Thana could make sense of his behavior. He doesn't hurt me, I reassure him. He doesn't ask anything in exchange for the favors he grants. I certainly couldn't offer something as valuable anyways. Thana shoots me a disbelieving look before crossing his arms over his chest and seeming to retreat further into himself. I don't trust him. His voice is hard and factual and alarming, it seems, even to his own ears. He opens and closes his mouth in a few false starts, flicking his ears agitatedly as the words that he wants do not come to him. His tail flicks and curls, and before I have the chance to intervene in case he becomes violent, it all leaves him in a single breath. All the agitation and tension in his body bleed out as he squeezes his eyes closed against the soft light of the room. We sit like that, in silence for a while, as Thana seems to relearn how to breathe properly. I'm sorry, please don't say anything, but I can't trust him. His voice comes out softer this time, subdued and with no small amount of pain behind it. Thana, why did you come here then? If you didn't think he could help... I try to ask, but he cuts me off. I brought them because I knew he could help. Thana shakes his head, but not at me, as if trying to dislodge the concept of my master being able to provide help, as if frightened by the concept that he could provide something that would have been impossible otherwise. I can smell the salt in the air, and I do my best to focus my eyes on any other bauble in the room. I'm not quite sure what would happen if I saw Thana cry, but if he didn't kill me, I have the feeling that something else would have been irrevocably lost. Maybe it is enough to know that it's a spectacle that doesn't want an audience. Stars know. I never wanted an audience when I cried, though it always did seem to happen in the presence of one. Thana takes a moment as his voice cracks. I'm familiar with fighting my own body like this. Trying to speak with even a little dignity when your body demands that you curl up in a ball and sob is quite a formidable task. It's enough, I think, to simply press my shoulder into his, allow for that solid point of contact as I examine a red glass bauble on the other side of the room and ignore the shaking in his body. It's bad out there, especially in winter, especially for the little one. I didn't have any other place that I could send them. I didn't have anyone else who could help. Most of the people who are safe, they let strays stay in their backyard for the night. Sometimes they'll feed one of the cuter ones if they act docile and take it from their hands. But no one would have done what your master did tonight. He eventually continues, leaning back into my solid presence. He's a good person, Thana. I say it without thinking. What does that even mean? A good person. There are plenty of good people in this world, and none of them would have done what my master did tonight. It doesn't mean a set of characteristics. It doesn't mean a set of values. Hell, it doesn't even mean safe. Not for our kind. Not always. It's amorphous and meaningless, especially here. And yet, it had sounded so correct in my head, so obvious. Blue, I can't think that way. He's done so much. At some point, he's gonna want something. And it's gonna break me. Thana's voice shakes as he attempts to force a chuckle to punctuate the statement. Thana, I've been with him for 2 months now, and he hasn't done anything to me. The man hasn't even fucked me. I feel a little lightheaded as I admit it aloud. It's unusual for an owner to restrain themselves, but it's not unheard of. I had a mistress who thought herself a kind and gentle soul. She bought me from the market dregs, discounted twice over from so many past owners. She said she wouldn't hurt me. She said she wanted to take care of me. She said that she had bought me because she thought used pets deserved a second chance, and my eyes were pitiful. I had thought she was the best owner I could have ever asked for. She wanted a sweet pet who knew that they owed her their life, who would serve her with a devoted heart. She waited nearly a whole week before she started using me. She let me get adjusted to the house and treated my more serious wounds. I thought it was good. She liked the idea of caring for something broken more than she liked me. That mistress lost interest before my bruises had fully faded.
The two of you haven't had sex?
Vanna looks at me, confused, eyes glistening but wiped free of tears. I open my mouth to answer, but then shut it again as my cheeks heat. I was going to say no, but that isn't quite true, is it? He hasn't fucked me, but we have had sex. Technically, well, we've... I stutter out, trying to ignore the heat in my face, but Vanna cuts me off.
Blue, this is what I'm talking about. You think he's a good guy, but he's manipulative. It's easier that way, and you don't think you're being forced, but...
It's my turn to cut him off. Vanna, he went down on me. There's no easier or gentler way to say it, and I'm oddly relieved to be forced to say it all as a rush rather than being given the opportunity to stutter my way through it.
What?
Vanna practically screams in my ear. Quiet! I wave my hand in a futile attempt to keep Vanna's volume down. They probably can't hear anything upstairs anyway. I've certainly never heard anything when my master experiments down here.
You are fucking with me.
Vanna points accusingly, but I can see the doubt in his eyes. My face is thoroughly aflame.
Yeah, imagine how I felt. How did that even happen?
Vanna gets close, looking me over carefully for any sign of a lie. Stars, it's a wonder there's blood anywhere else in my body. My cheeks are so warm. I was pressing him. I didn't trust him, and I wanted to feel safe. I wanted something familiar, so... Stars, if anyone pushed anything, it was me. There's something in my throat, and suddenly I can't speak.
You asked for sex, and he went down on you.
I simply nod, pressing my overheated face into my hands, trying to work up the courage to speak again. Vanna waits patiently as I try to breathe and piece together coherency. It takes a minute to bury the embarrassment that's clawed its way into my chest. But when I look up, Vanna's just sitting there, seemingly still waiting for an explanation. He heals me and treats me with kindness, protects me like I'm made from glass. If there's an angle he's working, I've yet to find it. Even to my own ears, my voice sounds weak, but it's the best I can do. And better yet, it's all true.
I have to admit, he seems really kind. He's good with Uva.
Vanna responds, cautiously. I smile, thinking of my master's dealing with the child. He was good with the child, but I suppose I shouldn't be surprised. My master had told me that he had younger siblings, and caring for them is obviously an experience that he looks back on with fondness.
He likes kids.
Vanna hedges delicately.
Do you think he wants any? Or at the very least, some roly little kits around the house?
I open my mouth to say something. Anything. When I realize I don't have an answer to that. He hasn't said anything about that, but he also hasn't cast the familiar spell that suppresses my heat and ensures infertility. I don't know. He hasn't said anything about it, but he hasn't said anything against it. I'm suddenly seized by a cloying fear. I've never carried a child before. My masters cared for me more as a toy than as a breeding tool. They never wanted to breed from me, and thanks to their spell, I never had to worry about accidents. It's dangerous. That much I know. Dangerous and painful. Not to mention that it takes a long time. A frankly ridiculous amount of time to remain in favor with one master. Then again, that would be a good explanation for all of his special care. He's taken his time with me, healing my wounds and feeding me up to a safer weight. It's not dissimilar to the methods taken with a newly selected breeding pair. Breeders like to make sure their stock are both in optimal position. Otherwise, the already dangerous process can have unforeseen complications. But my master wouldn't have used me in his class if he had those kinds of plans for me. It wouldn't have been too much of a risk, right?
I get it. Thana cuts in, dismissing my mental spiral. Sorry to worry you. I doubt he would have kept it to himself if it was a goal. You've got nothing to worry about.
Thana smiles shakily, and I can't help but think that he's a terrible liar. Thana doesn't believe himself, but I do take a bit of solace in his words. My master wouldn't have kept this from me. He would have asked. If nothing else, there would have been some questions about my fertility, and seeing as how much of an uphill battle it was to get him to have sex with me, I probably would have seen a few profiles for the studs he was considering.
What about you? Did you ever have a kid?
I ask, trying desperately to stop thinking about my master going through profiles of candidates to fuck me until I was with child.
They wanted more of me, but my body just wouldn't support it. There were a lot of failed attempts.
Thana shrugs with a weak smile. I'm sorry, I whisper.
Don't be.
He takes a moment to chuckle at some unspoken joke before continuing.
I never really wanted kids. They're cute and all, but that's a nightmare that I would not wish upon my body.
I watch the sand elemental on the desk play with the food wrappers we've left behind, the grains all shifting and turning, yet somehow making up a whole. The silence isn't oppressive, but it is uncomfortable. I barely know what to say to Thana in the best of times. How about we get you upstairs? My master will probably have food cooking, and he can take a look at that hole in your head. I stand, offering my hand to help Thana up.
I don't have a hole in my head,
Thana grumbles, but he takes my hand and follows me up the stairs.